everyone! This is part 2 of recreating the Brittany Allen sweatshirt that I wanted for my birthday but was discontinued before I could order one. So I ended up challenging myself to attempt to make one. The day before my birthday I drafted the pattern, which was part 1. You can find the link for that in the description below or at the end of this video. On my birthday, back in November, I woke up, did a little pampering, and got ready for the day. I made myself some fresh squeezed orange juice, pandemic style, and some pancakes. Ugh, every time. Then I got to work cutting out all the pieces. Place all the pieces on the fold where indicated. Note how my pattern was curved slightly, but I just pretended it wasn't and straightened it out with my fabric. Like I said, this was my first time attempting to make clothes, so there were a few mistakes. Pin everything in place and cut with scissors or a rotary cutter. You will have a front and back panel, 2 sleeves, a pocket, and 4 identical pieces for the hood. Start with the front and back pieces. Just FYI, if you notice this dot, it's a speck of dust on my camera lens that I didn't notice till basically the end of this video. Sorry. Open up the sweatshirt and take your front and back pieces and place them right sides together and sew or serge across the shoulder area. It's taking shape already. Now we're going to attach the sleeves. Pin right sides together, making sure to match the center of the sleeve where the fold line is to the seam where we just sewed the front and back together. This is when I realized the sleeves were a little wonky where the cuff would be because I didn't account for the curve of the elastic. I just cut that part off and it was fine. For the pocket, fold the curved edges in 1/2 inch and stitch down. This fabric doesn't fray, so we don't need to finish the inside edge. Then fold in the top and side edges and stitch in place. The bottom edge will be closed with the ribbing band we'll attach later, so you don't need to worry about that. Fold the front of the sweatshirt and the pocket piece in half and mark with a pin to find the centers. And then match up the pins and sew up either side and along the top. But make sure you leave the curve area free because that's where your hands will go. Or a cell phone or chapstick or whatever. Line up the sides of the body and the bottom of the arms right sides together. Stitch this all together. I couldn't resist trying it on. It's looking good, it's comfy, it's not sewn together at the bottom yet. I forgot about that for a second. For the hood, match the pieces right sides together. Remember, you will have 4 pieces for this. Sew them together to create the front and back pieces. Flip one right side out and place it inside the other so right sides are together, matching up the seams. Sew along the top curve. Now flip the hood right side out. I eyed up where the holes would go and marked with a pin for the drawstring, which will be placed on the outer part of the hood. I used my buttonhole foot to stitch the opening, and used a button that was the approximate size I wanted the hole to be for a guide. This worked really well for the first one, not so well for the second because the fabric bunched up, triggering the machine to reverse and think it was done sewing the hole. Then I tried to restart it and jammed up my whole machine. I ended up having to cut it out, which created a weird lumpy part that I just trimmed down. Call this part distressed and voila, it is now high fashion. Use some scissors to open up the center stitches to create the opening for the tie. While I had the whole thing apart, I cleaned it out. It gets pretty gross in there. I added some fray check to the wonky part. Iron the seam flat. Now stitch a line around the hood to create the casing for the drawstring. I made mine about 1 inch from the edge. The 2 buttonholes will be between this and the front seam. Now find the center of the back of the sweatshirt and match that up with the center seam of the hood, right sides together. By the way, the sides with your buttonholes are now the right side. Pin this in place. The hood will be on the outside of the sweatshirt. Sew or serge to attach it together. Mine did not quite end up with the overlap I wanted, but it wasn't horrible. Take the ends of the serger thread and use a needle to feed them back through the stitches. I put a couple drops of fray check, that way it won't unravel. Now cut the fabric for the ribbing. You will need enough for a band and 2 cuffs. Remember to double the height because you'll be folding this over. Your cuff should be slightly smaller than the end of the sleeve. Stitch along the shorter edges to create a loop. Fold the fabric so the seam is on the inside. I tried the cuff on to make sure it fit. Then fold in half to find the center front and mark with a pin. Fold the pin and the center seam together and mark either side with a pin. This is called quartering your fabric. Do the same to the end of the sleeve. Make sure your sweatshirt is right side out and slip the cuff over the end of the sleeve. Match up all the pins, making sure the raw edges and the seams are right sides together. You can see that the sleeve is a little bunched up inside. When you sew this together, tug a little to even it out between the pins. It's stretchy, so this part should be a little fitted. If you're using a sewing machine to attach the ribbing, make sure you use a zigzag stitch so it's able to stretch. Again, I used a needle to feed the serger threads through the stitches and a little fray check to hold it in place. Now we're going to attach the band. It's a lot like attaching the cuff, except this time you will cut a piece of ribbing for the front and one for the back. It comes in a wide tube, so I cut 2 pieces to the height that I needed, and then cut along one edge to trim the width to size. Then sew the side seams together along the short edges. Fold the raw edges together so that the seams are on the inside. I quartered the band and the bottom of the sweatshirt. Then found the midpoint between all of those pins just to make sure it stayed a little more even. Slide the band over the bottom of the sweatshirt so the raw edges are together, and match up the side seams and all the pins. Then sew it all together. The last step is tidying up all the loose threads. It was technically finished, but I wasn't happy with how the neck area looked. I had a few choices. I could cover it with a scrap of fabric, take off the hood and completely remake it larger, or take off the hood and take the shoulders in and reattach. I decided to put it aside for like 5 months and not deal with it. So after digging it back out, I decided the easiest option would be to add a scrap of fabric to cover where it didn't quite come together in the front. Another, we'll just say, high fashion edition. I measured and cut a strip of fleece, then folded in 2 sides 1/4 of an inch and stitched in place. Then I matched the right side center of the scrap to the wrong side center of the front, and sewed inside along the neck seam. I flipped the scrap piece around to the front and folded the raw edge in to hide it. I made it as even as possible and then stitched it in place. Put in your hoodie tie and you have yourself a sweatshirt. You can attach the safety pin to the tie to help feed it through. I'm gonna tie-dye mine first, so I'm gonna leave this off for now. And now you have a fully wearable sweatshirt. Nice job!